tell me more about this. But before you do, let me just, for those that are new to listening to this podcast and those that didn't see our last interview, Robert, you're the COO or Chief Operating Officer at Animas, which
I'm the
is,
center director. That's
oh,
my
Centre
official title.
Director.
Yeah, yeah,
Apologies. Apologies. Centre Director for Animas,
yeah,
coaching school in the UK that trains individuals in how to become qualified coaches,
yeah,
diplomas in transformational coaching.
yeah,
This is how we met because I studied with you back in 2017. I would regard it as the best coaching qualification there is out there. So if anybody is looking to become a coach, definitely look up Animas. But one of the things that has fascinated me about your journey over the last 18 months is when I was studying with you, one of the things that I found the most valuable was the way that your trainers got us in person to really support each other, that face to face, looking at the emotion, reading people's body language. When we were doing the presence module, for example, it was
mm,
the fact that we were together and connected in a room really made a difference. So I'm really interested because organizations are struggling with this. They're like, how do we connect with each other
mm,
when we're not in a room together? And you're now teaching people how to do that online. So how
yeah,
have you managed to do that?
yeah. So I guess the beginnings, it was partly experimentation,
Mm-hmm.
because we went online overnight.
Mm.
So I think it was something like the Wednesday or Thursday, we had trainers flying out to Berlin and to, uh, I think it was Amsterdam. I could be wrong, but we had trainers flying out to deliver training. And at that point, people started talking about borders being closed. And we went, oh, if borders are closed, how do we do this? And we're like, well, the only way to do it is to do it online, but that's not how we deliver our training. Luckily, I guess we delivered parts of what we do online. So all of our supervision elements were online. So we had a sense of what it could be like. We flew everybody home who was out to do training, which, that was a logistical challenge in itself because everybody at that point was trying to fly home.
Oh gosh,
Um,
yeah.
and then I remember at that time, Marcus Stone was part of our head of training team, or was the head of training, part of the Animas team. And he and I just went online and researched how to do this and just had daily, hourly conversations. We made, I don't know, I want to say hundreds, maybe it wasn't hundreds, but we made loads of videos about how to do it. And we would have our iPads, our laptops, our desktops, and our phones all signed in to Zoom meetings to see how do you operate this and how do you get your iPad to be the whiteboard and how do you use the breakout spaces and all of that. So we just experimented and tested things out. But the other thing that we did was we spoke to the community and said, this is what's happening. This is the journey that we are going on. We would like you to come on that journey with us. And if you choose not to, that's fine. That's okay. But if you choose to come on the journey, let's go on that journey together. So that people had the choice to join us on that journey or to go, do you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait until we go in person because at that point we thought in person was around the corner.
Yeah.
So people began to wait, and then we started saying to people, just try it, try it out, see what it's like, and then we can talk about it. And so our trainers just amazingly jumped in and just went with it and went for it, and we got better at it over time. So there's that part of it of doing it over time allows you to get better. So how do you do that? But then there's the other piece of you know engagement is about being seen and about being heard. So how do you let everybody know that you can hear them? How do you speak to individuals? How do you call people by their name? How do you allow people to put their hands up so they can jump in and be part of that conversation? How do you still put people into groups? And that's all possible on Zoom. So it's like, okay, we have to change how we're doing those things uh, to allow it to feel that we are connected by putting people into smaller groups and then bring them back into bigger groups. So that was part of the learning process of it. And I think the other part is really helping people to manage their distractions, because it's so easy to be here and have your phone there, and have people coming in and out. And it's like, what are the distractions that we're going to be okay with? So one of the things that I've said to the team, it's been wonderful seeing them in their homes. And there's been something quite fun, partners arriving with cups of tea, or the kids coming in to see what's going on, or pets. Cats are classic for walking across the screen, and that's been really interesting because you're seeing people's homes and their natural environment. So it's like, okay, we'll accept those as part of it, but how do we not have our chat open on the side of the screen for our Hangouts or whatever kind of chat system we use, and so we can still stay present and go, right, I'm here, so my phone's off or away, so I can stay connected to what's happening.
Yeah, amazing. And you mentioned community, and I know at Animas you've created an absolutely incredible community and network of people. We're all part of that community. If we've trained with you, if we've come to any of your events or anything to do with Animas, you get brought in as part of the community. And that, for me, the in-person again was vital for that. We'd go for lunches halfway through the training and we'd hang out. So how have you managed to maintain that?
So part of that has been, we brought Kat in, or maybe she was here just before then. I can't quite remember the timings, but to really allow and to purposely create community events so people still feel connected. So one of the things that we have is a coffee and connect half hour, and they happen 2 or 3 times a week, where anybody that's part of the community can just jump online at that time and meet other people that are part of the community and have a chat over coffee.
Brilliant.
And so we have these touch points throughout the week where people can just get together and have conversations. We have our community town halls where the whole community are invited to just have a conversation about what's happening with Animas, any thoughts, ideas, any challenges, any sharing of updates, so that people still feel part of this community. The trainers explored things like, okay, so if we're having a break, do we put people in breakout rooms so they can come and chat together? Do we leave the Zoom room open, so if you want to stay and have your lunch and talk to who's in the space, that you can do that, or you can move yourself into a breakout room to have a chat with somebody? So it's like, how do you go about recreating those physical connections, but in a virtual space?
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much that people could learn from this, and you did it so quickly. Like, so quickly.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting for us, because for a long time we talked about having online training. We were like, yeah, but we're an in-person school, and
Yeah.
that's part of what we do. And we were like, well, it's not hard, it's challenging to recreate it. So let's think about how we might do that. And then it was like, well, we've got a choice. We can pause or we can flip. So we were like, we're going to flip. We're going to go for
Thank goodness
this.
you flipped.
And there were other schools that we saw that paused
Yeah.
and did something different, and then over time went into the virtual space. And then there were schools that were already virtual that weren't impacted by this change. So that was also interesting in itself.
Very. So come on then, what's new at Animas? What's been the biggest development over the last 6 months? What's hot off the press in terms of what's next or what's coming?
I think there was an identifying of Animas missions. So our first mission is very much what we do, which is to support and train authentic, person-centered, holistic coaches. And it was kind of, let's redefine that and redial into that. And then there was our second mission, which was about a community of learners. How do we build a community of learners, of supporters, an engaged community? And Kat's part of that mission, and driving that forward. Then I think that, and that's always been part of what Animas did. And I think one of the newest things to this was the social impact arm of Animas. And go, okay, we've always done social impact projects, but they've been now and again projects, and there's been no real consistency or system behind it or driver to it. And we were like, so who's going to do that? And so we brought in Emma, and she's been driving that through amazingly. And she's on the second wave of one of our projects called Creating Space, which is a project supporting educators, where we pair them up with coaches. They have a series of 6 sessions over time that support them through the challenge of COVID right now. And so that's been one of the projects that's going into its second wave. There's some amazing feedback from that, where people just felt really supported, but also the community felt that they can actually give back and they can support people and have a channel to support people. Because one of the things that we found was that people were doing amazing things all over the place. It's like, well, how do we come together and harness the power of coaches to create change, to create social impact? We're doing a micro project around young people with that. And then Emma has some ideas about other things we're doing later on in the year. And we're also doing a social impact incubator. So we're going to pull people together that have ideas about social impact projects, but don't really know how to get those ideas off the ground, and work with them to look at, well, what's important when you create these projects? What do you need to put in place when you create these projects? So building on our own learning and sharing that with others.
Amazing. Gosh, that's really progressive, really progressive.
Yeah.
And I've noticed recently on social media, you're hitting the headlines with diversity and inclusion as well. What's going on there? Literally hitting the headlines.
So how do I put this all together? So we've kind of reignited our podcast, and we called it Coaching Uncaged, with this idea that it would feed into our fourth mission, which is to champion, to support, to challenge the coaching industry. And the idea was to bring other thought leaders into the space to talk about coaching, talk about their work as coaches, to help educate other coaches, to give them new ideas and new ways of working. So that's kind of where it started. And soon after that, the pandemic came along, but also the incident with the death of George Floyd. And when that happened, it caused us as an organization to ask questions about what was our part in making a stand or challenging the system or systems, and what do we do with this? So lots of people talking about Black Lives Matter, and yes, they do, and all lives matter, but we have to recognize, whose life is in jeopardy, therefore who do we need to protect? And I don't think that's just about color. I think that's about gender. I think that's about ability. I think there's lots of inclusion points that we could dive into here. But George Floyd sort of made us ask the question about what were we going to do? And we took a while to think about that. We saw lots of people jumping out and saying, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And Sam, myself, and Nick just went, let's just think about what we want to do and how we want to do this. And we'd had lots of conversations internally about diversity and inclusion, about the fact that, I'd go to events and be one of a very few members of the event that were non-white. And it was like, well, what's that about? That's interesting. But we'd only ever talked about that amongst ourselves. And the Animas community is so mixed, we've kind of gone, yeah, well, we've got this mixed community and that's happening over there. Not quite sure what that's about. Had a few conversations, and then we sort of went, hey, let's talk about this. We've done some work around this, but let's double down on that work. Let's involve our community in that work. So I started just inviting people to have conversations about diversity and inclusion onto the podcast, and that just kind of grew. And then Sam and I started looking at, okay, so if we were to write about this, what would we write and what would we say? And Sam, who's our content manager, is a great editor, and so we would sit, have conversations. He would capture those conversations. We would go back, look at it, change it, edit it, and then we would say to people, do you want to publish this? And people started to go, oh yeah, we'll publish that. We're interested in what you've got to say. And then people started reaching out to us to join them in their podcasts. And then, of course, ACTO came along, so the Association of Coaching Training Organizations, and their conference. And they, as they do each year, they said, who would like to come and speak at our conference? One of the things that we're focusing on is the inclusion conversation.
Great.
And we put a pitch together on that, and they came back and was like, great, would love you to be our keynote opening speaker. And so that's happening in a week's time or something like that. Yeah.
So amazing, so amazing. And again, just really progressive thought from Animas, because you could see that you didn't have the problem per se yourself. You could see it was elsewhere, but you actually decided, well, that's not okay. Like, just because we don't have it doesn't mean it's okay for it to exist outside of us. So
yeah, and I think we do have it. I think I think everybody has their unconscious bias.
Yes.
And I think that it's recognizing that we have that, and recognizing what's happening in our system that we just aren't thinking about, that we could pay attention to, and where are we not working hard enough where we could work harder. So and also where, when we think about inclusion, are we not inclusive as an organization? And so it forced us to think about what else we could do within our own organization to really push that, and to recognize that it's a journey. It isn't that you go, oh, we're inclusive, and we've written a policy and therefore it's happening. It's like, well, this takes work, and it takes energy, and it takes effort, and it takes consideration, and it takes courage, because one of the things I remember saying to the community was, I know I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to use the wrong phrases, the wrong terms. I'm going to use outdated language. So you're going to have to correct me, and I'm going to have to be able to hold those corrections and work with that to develop myself as I go through this. And I think that's been a really interesting part of the journey as well, is kind of having the courage to go on the journey with our community and our associates.
Yeah, really, really brave. It does require courage. It's interesting what you've just described. It sounds like it's been an incredible journey at Animas, and we've had a very, very, very similar journey at Luminary Mindset, because everything that we were doing previously was face-to-face, and our clients, because we coach executives of big corporations, they expect that face-to-face. They expect it as part of the kind of the service, which is why I was going to spend all my time flying around the globe before this happened. And we've had to do the same. We've had to go, okay, how do we do this online? How do we create transformative events or transformative conversations through a screen when the person is on the other side of the world, sometimes in a completely different state, a completely different environment to where we are? It's been an absolutely fascinating journey. Obviously, Jay, who's part of the team now, has helped us with that. But we've just had to really, and a part of me thought this time last year, this won't work. Say it's similar to you. Will it work? Is it going to have the same? Are we going to be able to provide the same experience, or, well, not the same experience, but the same outcome, I guess? Can we give the client the same outcome, and can we give them what we know is there, is accessible and available to them, but through this digital media? So it's been a very similar journey. And like you, social impact social impact, loose use of social impact in what we're doing. Impact, definitely, because we're now focusing on the mining industry, which a lot of people wouldn't necessarily see as being a positive impact industry to work with. But the work that we're doing is to make sure that they do start innovating more towards green energies, is to impacting on the communities in a more emotionally intelligent way, not just looking to dig up earth and turn it into cash, but actually how can they have more of a positive impact and leave a more positive footprint in their leadership. So very, very similar stories. And so, on the go on.
I was going to say, are you familiar? I'm just glancing off because I've got a book here on my desk.
What is it?
Called Frederick Laloux, Reinventing Organizations.
No, let me note that down, because I was going to ask you what books. I asked you last time, what books are you reading? And you always give a good list. Our listeners, we should open a Robert book club on the podcast. So what is it? Say it again, sorry.
Reinventing Organizations.
Okay.
By a gentleman called Frederick Laloux.
Yeah.
But he also, if you find his website, he also has a series of videos about reinventing organizations, because he's very much into this self-managed team, self-managed organizations
Great.
mindset. And one of the episodes that I listened to recently, where he talks about the impact of what we do on the world, and
Oh, yeah.
he uh, was working with some teams, and one of them was a fashion brand, and they had an image, and he was just like, do you know that image isn't a great image? You know, what does that represent? And when you think about what that represents and what that feeds into, what does that mean for you as an organization and as an individual? And it caused the leader of that organization to go, oh yeah, that isn't great. Yeah, it does sell clothes, but when you think about that, that's not great. So what do we do about that? How do we change that? And what's the cost of that change? And how do we deal with or manage the cost of change? And I think there's
Yes.
something really interesting with the work that you're doing with the mining organizations, is going, okay, there is a cost to that change, but there is also meaning and purpose behind the change. And how do we dial into that meaning and that purpose that offsets the financial cost of the change?
Exactly. When they've got the people that own them breathing down
Mm,
their necks for more cash, more cash. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
really, really complex situation. And that's why I love it, because we're trying to bring emotional intelligence or elevated levels of consciousness or just self-awareness to organizations that are very dominated by IQ, very subject matter expertise, engineers,
mm,
mostly male. The numbers, shows that mostly male, very high intellect, very highly academically strong. Doesn't mean they don't have emotional intelligence. Obviously they do, but the balance, the
yeah,
culture internally
yeah.
is skewed more towards knowing data and knowing facts and using one part of your brain and not the other, which cuts out so much innovation, creativity, thought leadership. Yeah, and they're really craving it now.
Mm, mm. And I think, as we sort of conversations about climate crisis uh, be, be, become stronger within organizations, that becomes part of what people are looking at and going, well, what's my impact? I remember when we were doing in-person training and we were traveling, we were going, okay, we're doing a lot of traveling, we're flying around here. What's our footprint, and how do we offset that? And
Mm,
working with our flight providers to go, well, what schemes do you have, and how can we be part of those schemes to offset what we're doing? And one of the things that we now do is the course books that we provide for training. They're a digital version, so you have a choice: do you want a paper version or do you want a digital version? And if you have a paper
brilliant.
version, that's cool, but it's on recycled paper. So it's like, what are the bits that we can do that create uh, a, an impact, or allow us to think about the impact that we are creating? So one of the things is the organization that we use, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they have centers around the world. So when they're posting stuff out, it's not that they're posting it from the UK and it's getting on a plane and flying, so it's still part of that. It's like, well, actually, when somebody in the United States needs a book, they just say to their factory in the United States, print this book and send it to that person. The same in
Brilliant.
Germany. And it's like, okay, how can we think about things in that way that also have an impact uh, from us as an organizational piece?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that leads me to thinking about diversity of thought. And you were talking
Mm,
about diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that I'm experiencing in the mining industry, and we work with professional services as well, is there's a particular type of, as I was describing, there's a particular type of person or individual that learns about what's necessary to work in the mining industry. And there are very few females, and there are very few people who've done any kind of there aren't musicians and artistic
mm.
directors in the mining industry, so they're missing this whole diversity of thought piece as well, which is quite fascinating to witness. What's been your experience of that?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, around that, is that sometimes those skills or ways of working exist, but because they're not recognized in the organizations, the people that have those skills keep them to themselves.
Yes.
So there will be musicians and
Brilliant.
artists and
Yes.
photographers and dancers as part of those organizations, but because that isn't something that's highlighted and recognized as part of the learning, that people won't necessarily bring that to work. And so there's
Yes.
something really interesting about how do we bring our whole selves to work? How do we allow the stuff that we do outside of our jobs to exist within our jobs as well, to help us find those solutions and those ways forward?
I love that. And you teach and taught that so well to me. And I know you teach it so well now. And I just spoke before this podcast, I spoke to one of my old clients. He's a COO of a global professional services firm. And one of the things that I used to coach him on was bring your full self to the workplace, bring all the parts of you. And he, really hard for people who are in really senior positions to expose themselves. It feels like they're exposing themselves. They're not, but it feels like they are. And we spoke just an hour ago, and he said to me, we hadn't caught up in ages, and he said, I'm finally being myself at work. I'm finally relaxed about just showing up as myself, and it's making such a difference. And I thought, wow, amazing.
Yeah, and I recognize that I've been really fortunate in my journey within Animas as an organization, because before I was full time at Animas and I was a freelancer, I was still doing a lot of my arts based work. So that
Yeah.
so that kind of would be part of the conversations that I would have, and then as I did more and more work with Animas and then became full time, that was still part of my kind of existence. So people knew that I did that work and would kind of notice that my hands do a lot of talking, and that's because of my mime training. And so I'd often talk about that fact within the training. So it was like bringing in these different parts. And I've always felt that, especially, well, not just especially for coaches, but coaches have a habit when they start training of going, I'm going to forget my past life, what I used to do, because I'm now doing this new thing. And I've always been like, no, bring that with you, because it's food for thought. It's part of you, and it's part of what's going to help you propel forward. So I've always kind of demonstrated that, I guess. But my team know the kind of music that I like to listen to. And some of that music I would say isn't necessarily appropriate for world broadcast. And I'm like, I like a bit of old school rap, and you wouldn't necessarily agree to all the lyrics, but it's what I like. And so I'm gonna, no, this is what I like. And it's kind of in that space. And I think there's something useful for people to recognize the human behind the role.
Yes, couldn't agree more. And talking about coaches and what coaches can bring, one of the things that I am 100% committed to is helping corporations create what I'm calling a coaching culture, which is I want leaders within large global organizations to become coaches. I want them to actually have that as their leadership style. If you were to speak to the CEO of, say, Microsoft and say, okay, you should have a coaching culture within your corporation, what would be your elevator pitch? Why would that be a good thing for them to consider?
I love these on the spot questions. I think that there's something here about, we can never know all the answers as individuals. However, by asking questions, we can allow ourselves and others to discover those answers. And we never know the untapped knowledge of an individual until we ask questions to tap into that knowledge. And as leaders, if we consistently tell people what to do, they will never innovate. They will just wait to be told what to do next. And when we want our teams to support us as well as each other, they need to be able to ask questions and to think for themselves. And so when we have coaching cultures in organizations, it allows people to think for themselves. It allows them to ask questions of themselves and of each other and of you as the leader. It allows for a more open dialogue to exist within the organization. So more transparency. So you don't have he said, she said, they said, we said conversation, because we're having those conversations. And it also, I think, allows us to really tap into, are our teams in the right place for them to thrive? Because with those conversations, we find out where's your struggle, but where's your strength. And one of the things that has always been an amazing experience here at Animas is having those conversations, or having had those conversations myself with the CEO, Nick, and to be able to go, oh, okay, your strength's over there. Let's talk about how we get you over there to do that so you can be at your best. So as an organization, we get the best from you and you're happy to be here delivering your best. So I would talk to that. And at the beginning of this conversation, and you were saying, that I was the COO of Animas. And it's like, that was one of our conversations, an open coaching conversation that made us go, wait a minute, what, we're giving you this title, but that's not where you're at your best. Let's explore where you're at your best and what's the title that represents you at your best, which is where we came to a center director, because that's, for me, is like an artistic director, works with the teams to create the thing that we do and supports everybody to do that thing and challenges and pushes you to do that thing. And it's like, that's who I am, that's what I do. So let's have a title that matches that, instead of trying to squeeze me into this box that this title suggests that isn't quite right. So, by being able to have coaching conversations within the organization, those things can change and shift without anybody feeling lack or let down. Because I remember, for a while, I was the CEO of Animas. So Nick Bolton, who's the CEO and founder of Animas, stepped back from the organization. I stepped into that CEO role. And then he came back into the organization. I became the COO, and then I became the center director. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh, that's really sad that you've been demoted. And I said, no, this is brilliant. I'm doing the thing that I'm good at. And I don't feel a sense of demotion. I feel a sense of change, but I also feel like I'm in the right place. And it's through those conversations that allows you to do that. And I think coaching conversations and coaching cultures allow you to do that. And that doesn't mean that it happens all the time, every day, and we always get it right. There are still the usual struggles and challenges that an organization would go through. So don't think, oh, we're going to become a coaching culture and all of our problems disappear. What it does do is allow you to face those challenges. It allows you to ask questions of yourself and of your teams, and it allows people to go, oh, do I want to be here and be part of this? And if I don't, what's the conversation that we can have so that we can move on in a useful, beneficial way for everybody?
Wow. That was an incredible answer. I honestly, hanging off every single word. I am so glad we recorded that, and I might just play you in all my proposal meetings. Oh my goodness. So it's funny because often people assume when I'm working with corporations that I'm going to come in and I'm going to problem solve. I'm going to tell people what their blind spots are. I'm going to tell them where their limiting beliefs are. I'm going to get them to work on the things that they're no good at. And it's the complete opposite. And they're massive. You can see the relief when I say to them, actually, the best thing that we can do is have you know your strengths, know when you feel good and when you feel your best, and have you do more of that. And just repeat more. And let's look at where you feel out of alignment, and let's address that. Let's not address it through saying there's something wrong with you. Let's address it by saying, well, actually, that's just not who you are. Yeah. How can we transform it? Yeah. Such a good answer.
And that word alignment that you use there, I really like that, because we can feel that, can't we? We can feel when we're out of alignment. And
yeah,
I can imagine, and I don't know this to be true, but I imagine that there are people that you work with that have been out of alignment for most of their working lives.
Yes.
And find it hard to work out, well, what is alignment and what is doing what I enjoy and doing what I love. And being able to explore that with you must just be like, a breath of fresh air for people.
It really is, and we use different techniques, but we do use quite a lot of somatic coaching. So I get my clients to go
Mm.
into their body and actually tell me where they feel it. So when they're talking about something or explaining something, I'll say, "Where in your body can you feel that?" And they're not used to doing that. It takes a bit of practice. But when
Yeah.
they're telling me about things that they love doing, I'll say, "Okay, where in your body can you feel that?" And then they'll tell me about things where they don't love what they're doing, and I'll say, "Tell me where in your body you can feel that." And get them to start actually feeling what out of alignment feels like and what in alignment feels like in their body, rather than it being an intellectual thing.
Yeah, and then the beauty of that is when we're out of alignment, we can then go, well, what's going to take me more into alignment? Because there are things that we have to do in a
Yeah,
job, like just stuff that we
yeah,
have to do. And it's
yeah,
like, but how can we do this in a way that's going to make me more aligned? Or how can I find solutions around this? Who can
yeah,
I bring in? So, one of the things about being COO that was just challenging for me was that there was a lot of stuff about systems. And
yeah,
I was just like, okay, I am not the guy to create your system. If you want me to create your workshop, if you want me to talk about a project and what that might look like, yeah, let's do that. Let's sit at the whiteboard and create that. Um, so I need somebody around me who's going to be a systems thinker in the process terms. And so part of what I did was go, right, so who in the organization does that? And let's
yeah,
bring them closer to me so we can work together to make that happen. So one of the new initiatives that's happening internally is working with Ruth Randall, who's our operations manager, to go, okay, let's work closer together to bring those systems and those operations more alive and work more across the
mm,
organizations to look at how do they talk to each other and where are they not talking to each other and who's got a great process that they use that we haven't heard of or we haven't seen because they just
yeah.
do it in their department over there somewhere. Let's bring that into the organization so we can all benefit from that.
Amazing. I call that flattening the cultural hierarchy. So one organization we worked with, it was only a small organization, but we got everybody in the organization to do their Clifton Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
And then we just said, like, no hierarchy. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or if you're the admin staff. Whatever your strengths are, whatever the organization needs, tap into the
Yeah.
resources that you've
Yeah.
got, flatten the hierarchy completely from a cultural perspective, and just utilize, play to your strengths, play to your strengths. They loved it.
Yeah.
People were being invited into meetings that they never in a million years thought that they'd get invited to.
And they have these great ideas.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also, when you start saying let's play to our strengths, you remove this notion that I should know.
mm,
And as the leader, I should have all the answers because I'm going, well, that's not my strength. That you got that strength. So you come and sit and let's have the conversation and see what you think we should be doing or the direction that we should take.
exactly, exactly. So apart from more of these conversations, what does the world need?
What does the world need? I think.
Yeah.
Well, I'm deeply into Brené Brown,
Ah,
and so I think part of what we need is to de-armor ourselves
yeah,
or to demask ourselves. Um, we spend so much of our time playing out a role that we think we should be, or that's presented to us either through our culture, our family, our working environment, our friendship groups. This is who you should be. This is how you should be, as opposed to who am I. And I think there's something really interesting about not necessarily calling it vulnerability because that has its own connotations, but this idea of, but who are you at your true essence, and how can you embrace that part of yourself and live with that part of yourself and be okay with that. I mean, it comes back to coaching again, because I think that just kind of always, I think I'm just kind of a coach. I think I've always been a coach at heart, even before I knew
yeah,
what coaching was. So a lot of my kind of language kind of falls into that space. But this idea of, who are you at your authentic self, and how do you be okay with that and live in that? So I guess part of what the world needs are spaces for people to experiment with being themselves,
Yeah.
to play out what that might look like, and I think that's part of the work that you do, going into organizations, and sitting with people and going, so using language like in alignment and exploring what that means, and allowing who they are to exist without shame, blame, judgment, and going, it's okay to be that. Okay, how do you be more of that? And how do you share that to the world? Because I think when we're at our best, we've got the most to share. And when we're not at our best, we're so busy pretending and keeping everybody at bay from finding out that we have no energy. When we feel like we're an imposter, we spend all of our time trying to convince everybody else that we're supposed to be here, as opposed to just going, this feels weird being here, doesn't it? This feels unusual, and it's not to say that because you do coaching that's simple, or you never fall back into old patterns. When Acto invited me to do the talk, to do the keynote, it took me, I would say, at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, to kind of just settle with the fact that it's all okay. I'm just going to have a chat about the things that I do, and it's okay. I went through this whole thing of, what do they expect from me? What should I be saying? And just kind of going, whoa, wait a minute, what's happening there? You're feeling like an imposter, but you've been invited, so you can't be an imposter if somebody's invited you to do the thing that you're doing. But I could just feel that those kind of tensions kind of come into play, and just having to sit with that, and talk to my coach about it, and talk to friends about, this is what I was feeling, this is what was going on for me, and accepting it without kind of blaming myself or chiding myself for feeling that way, and just kind of going, okay, that's just a thing, right? Okay, it's cool. Right, now create a plan, off you go.
Brilliant. Oh, well, best of luck with that. You don't need luck, because like you say, you just show up as yourself, but it's very exciting. And Robert, I can't thank you enough for this. I love these conversations. I love them so much. Can we do them again, please?
Of course we can. Of course we can.
Can you come to all of my, like I said, all my proposal meetings? Can you just dial in?
And one of the things about these conversations that I find so inspiring is the work that you're doing, sort of remembering you in the training room, and you talking about the space that you were in, and what you'd like to be doing, and where you'd want to be going, and kind of seeing you in that space now doing this thing with these huge ambitions and desires that you're moving towards. It's just like, that's just amazing and so inspiring. I'm inspired by you, having seen you go through your journey.
Thank you. That's awesome acknowledgement. Thank you. And it's the spark that Animas ignited in me that you're now seeing. Because I have never, just to give you some context, I am not an academic human being. I'm an experiential learner. I love learning, but not through reading and I have never in my life consumed content like I did the Animas content. I wanted to read it. I wanted to consume it. I was so, whatever happened to me in that classroom, this is the product of it. So,
but I think you are an example of what it means to be in alignment. Because when you're in alignment, it's like you want to read everything. You want to go for everything, because you're doing the thing that you want to do.
Yes.
And it sets a fire, a light in you to do that and to continue to do that.
Yes. And if anybody wants to know what someone in alignment looks or sounds or feels like, it's someone who looks alive and excited and full of energy. And it's not everyone's cup of tea being around someone who's in alignment, but but everything's just so much joy in everything. It's just. Thank you. And we'll do this again. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad that I got your job title wrong, because it led us to an analogy and a story. So I was gonna correct that mistake, but I won't, because it was actually quite a useful segue.